You are now part of the Sierra Queries and Create List training. And welcome everyone. First off, I'm sure most of you know who I am. Steve Heiser from MCFLS Library Systems Admin. And before we get started, I'm just going to go through some housekeeping things regarding the meeting and how things are going to work. Some of you who have attended the other sessions know this is going to be old hat by the end of March. But what we're going to do here is, as far as the meeting goes, is to have all participants muted during the duration of the presentation. And then at the end of the session, we'll take questions via the chat interface on your GoToMeeting console, which is the chat interface is at the very bottom. We are using a training server, which allows more access to Sierra than our current preview mode. We'll talk about preview mode here in a few minutes. We're using the training server even though it doesn't have our coding, just because it allows more of a fuller look at creating lists and creating queries, whereas our preview mode does not do that. Also, this session is being recorded, and we'll make it available on mcflis.org after the session. We also have a YouTube channel for MCFLS. If you type in on YouTube, if you type in MCFLS1, MCFLS1, it will come up at the top of the list, our channels there, and all of the videos will be available on that channel as well. So in mcflis.org, we're just linking to the YouTube channel, but they will be all there. Okay, so goals for this training, it's the same as the other ones, sessions that we've done. And the primary goal is to give you what you need to know to be able to work with Sierra on April 2nd moving forward, particularly with regard to create list training and queries. And the secondary goal is to give you assurance that most of the functions work exactly the same way as they do in Millennium. This is definitely the case with create lists. There's not a whole lot of change taking place here. The timetable, well, I've got, I think, sort of good news. Our staff preview, which we would hope to have in place Tuesday, looks like we might be able to get that in very shortly. I just got an email from our project manager on this, Sierra, and they will hopefully be able to make a configuration change to get us to preview mode really quickly, or hopefully today. And we'll have to decide when to put staff into preview mode. I'm guessing if it's done later today or tomorrow, we would have staff in preview mode Monday at the latest. I won't go into really too much about preview mode other than to say that you're not going to be able to see everything in preview mode. This will be lasting from whenever it starts within the next few days here up until April 2nd. That will be our preview mode. Basically, the database is in a protected mode at that point. You cannot make any edits or changes, send notices, and in fact, you won't be able to run create lists in preview mode. So that's why I'm showing you this today, so you can kind of get an idea of what to expect. But it's more or less a way to get comfortable with the interface. And if you're prevented from doing certain operations, it's usually not because you don't have the authorizations to do so. It's because they're just locking out the database. So we don't make any changes to it. April 2nd is our go live date. This has not changed. The system will be unavailable the entire day, similar to January 20th. Offline circ will be available, and on April 2nd, we're asking libraries that do use offline circulation to use a special Sierra version of that, which we will make available prior to April 2nd, within the next week for those of you who maintain your own computers. We'll send that out to you guys. Okay, the topic for today is Sierra queries and create lists. I'm going to add a few other additional items to that. One is statistics, Millennium statistics, it's equivalent in Sierra, and also a brief note about SQL queries against the database and how that's going to work, how we envision that will work for staff who want to dig deeper into the database and get additional statistics and information from our database. So we'll talk about that as well. The first thing I'm going to do is, those of you who have attended these, I apologize, we'll be going through some of the same things that we did in the other sessions, but wanted to go through this for those of you who aren't going to be attending other ones. This will hopefully be new to you. What we're going to do is walk through some of the basics. We'll take a look at the catalog, how it looks, the search results look, and then take a look at the full record view before we get into all of the new things regarding create lists. Okay, so regarding the basics, the login process is going to be a little different based on who you are. For most of the suburban libraries, all the suburban libraries will have the same process where you use your initials to log in and not your generic login first. So you will have a one login process if you're a suburban staff member. So that means that your generic login for MC40, MACQ, MCAT will no longer be necessary in Sierra. That's just not going to be necessary. All of that information is combined into your initials. For the Milwaukee Public Library staff, you're going to use a process similar to Millennium where you have to set your location served with a generic login. That generic login will also set your access to workflows and your printers. So if you're a Milwaukee Public staff member, you'll be using a process similar to what you're doing now. And that's only because of staff that need to rotate among different libraries. We need to make sure that your location is set prior to you entering Sierra. But it's a very similar process to what you're doing now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. This is, again, a training server that's available to us through Innovative, and it's, I'm sure this is correct, located out in California, so there is a little bit of a delay here in getting the information. It's a little bit quicker if you're doing it in-house, just checking what we've done here at MICFLIS and getting into preview mode. And just to reiterate, all of the functions that you have in Millennium should be available here in Sierra. That's especially true for create lists. Everything is being brought over. Your saved queries, your exports, anything that you've done previous in Millennium will be brought over, so you don't have to recreate the wheel with regard to your saved searches and things like that. Okay, and just a brief note about passwords. Your password will be brought over into Sierra, the one you're currently using in Millennium. Hopefully you haven't changed it. If so, we'll be able to sort that out before April 2nd. That'll be part of this preview mode. But when we do go live on April 2nd, you will be able to change your password underneath the admin function. So you'll no longer need to use a telnet access point to change your password. This will all be done within the Sierra client. In fact, the telnet client, SSH client, is going away for the most part. It's still there for administrative uses, things that I have to do to change settings. But for the most part, the SSH client will be really not functional after April 2nd. If there are things that we need to do, we can certainly take care of that. But for the most part, everything will be available within the Sierra client. Okay, so if I wanted to change my password, I just click on that Change Password option, put in my old, and then retype the new password twice, hit OK, and then my password will be changed and saved onto the server. The layout of the screens is a little different here. This is one of the major differences here. I'm going to just move things around. One of the major differences with Sierra versus Millennium is the unified client. So instead of having different modules for cataloging, circulation, acquisitions, and serials, you now have one client that has a drop-down in the upper right-hand corner, and you would just use this to move between different functions that you are allowed to see. So no more modules, everything's in one client, and it does actually help us with regard to user licenses. Not that we've ever had too much of a problem with that, but we'll save in that area. The command menu at the top, where you see File, Edit, View, Go, and Tools, Admin, Reports, and Help, is pretty much the same as what you would see in Millennium. They are context sensitive in some cases, but for the most part, everything that you've seen in Millennium will show up here. For example, File, select Printer. All of these options are the same as they are Millennium. Same goes with most of these menus. The only exception to this is the Go menu, which is because they had to combine all these different modules into one interface, now requires an extra step to get to a particular workflow. So acquisitions, administration, cataloging, this was never here before because you were always in acquisitions and never had to choose this extra step. So all of the macros had to be manually managed and adjusted so that they could point to the correct area. So your F1 keys, all of those had to be adjusted. So hopefully we got all that straight, but that's something that we can take care of now between now and April 2nd. And just a minor point, that in Sierra they refer to these major categories here, for example, cataloging, student, serials, check-in, front desk, circ. All of these, administration, we don't use ERM, serials, circulation, all those are referred to as workflows rather than modules. And the areas underneath each workflow are referred to as functions. These are corresponding to the buttons that you would have in each module in Millennium. So there's a corresponding link there. As with Millennium, just because you see a function does not mean you have access. So you do need the authorization. So if I'm have the authorizations of a front desk circ aid, it does not mean I have the ability to do global update and cataloging just because I see it there. I still have to have authorization to do that. You'll notice that a lot of these workflows are kind of minimized. This one for cataloging student only has 3 functions beneath it. We can do customized workflows, but for the initial launch here on April 2nd, we're going to be using the 4 main functions or 4 main workflows for circulation, cataloging, acquisitions, and serials. All the suburban libraries will have that for every staff member to at least ensure that you will be able to do what you need to do on April 2nd. The MPL setup is slightly different because the branches don't do acquisitions or serials, so it's a little bit more stripped down, but you at least have your circulation module there, and it will be functional once you go live. One of the really nice parts about Sierra 2 that I just want to point out was that because of the Postgres database that we're using, it means that we won't have any more locked or busied records, and in theory, no more broken holds. The Postgres layout or infrastructure allows for multiple edits on the same record at once. So when in Millennium, when you made an edit to a record, it locked the record so no one else had access to it. And then that's not necessarily a bad thing, but in a Postgres world, you can actually make multiple edits on the same record and not lock it. It just makes for everything to work a lot smoother, and you won't have locked records. Okay, so we'll do a quick search here just to give you an idea what the database looks like. Do my search for Inferno. You'll notice that the title indices at the top here, these are a little different for the training database. Ours is a little bit less exhaustive than this, but the search interface is pretty much the same. Looks exactly like this. Yeah, but the search results screen is quite a bit different. I wanted to point those out before we get onto the create lists area. We do use the same indices as before. Nothing's changed. Within the search results window here, the frame, here you have the results in the middle frame, but you have two additional columns here on the far right-hand side. One is a summary column, which gives you the bibliographic record number, whether or not one or more items are available on that bib, and the attached records. So you'll see here one has the item record, and if you go down below here, we have an order record. It just gives you a real quick summary about what's attached to that particular bib. What's new here in, the last column here for preview also will include the book jacket once we have those hooked up. Apparently that's supposed to be taking place on April 2nd or soon after. We can do that. It's not available in preview mode. This eye here that you see with the icon with the eye surrounded by this circle is new to Sierra, and you'll see that everywhere in this interface. If you mouse over it, it gives you more information about the title, and if you're not interested in taking a look at the full record, but you want most of the major parts of it, you can just mouse over the eye and see all that information. This is not just for bibliographic records. It works for both Patron records, and any kind of results list that you come across will also have this, including create list results. You'll also notice on the left-hand side we have facets. This works similar to our Encore catalog. It's a much more stripped-down version of it, but you will have facets for format, language, locations, availability, and phrase. And I believe this is coming from the title. Since we're doing a title index search, it will bring those up here in this phrase area. We do not have a limit function here as a button on this top row of buttons here. It is available underneath this plus sign. If you click on it, all of the limiting functions will appear here. This is very similar to what you see in Millennium, but it will work a lot better. We use a new form of indexing called Lucene indexing, which would make this function work a lot better than it had in Millennium. And you can add additional fields to search by in terms of the limits by clicking on the plus icon next to each of these fields, and you can do multiple searches, similar to what you could do in Millennium. It looks a little different, but it is there. Okay, and I'm just going to take a real quick look at the full record before we get into create lists. All right, this is the summary view of the record. Looks identical to Millennium in many respects. However, the tabs that you may have grown accustomed to in Millennium have now been moved over to the left-hand side of the screen as buttons. So if you want to go back to the summary of this particular bib record, we only have one attached item record, and that's the entire list of records attached to this particular bib. But then you can also see item level or bib level holds by clicking on those buttons. The item record looks virtually identical. There's really nothing different here. Our fields may have different labels, but everything is going to be brought across with the same labels and the same coding, so nothing's really going to change in that regard. If we look at the full record, go to Edit, you'll see the layout's a little bit different for the full bibliographic record. I think this looks a lot cleaner, and at least to me, it looks a lot more intuitive in terms of how the mark tags are laid out. You have your indicators that are clearly marked as to which one they are. Is it first or second? And then the subfields here that are highlighted. That highlighting can be modified, I believe. So if that is something that bothers you, we can take a look at that. One thing that's a little new, it might take a little bit getting used to, is if you want to go back to browse mode, you do have to click on this button that's in the upper left-hand corner. Just might be something to get used to. If you click on that, it goes back to the search results that you were using. Okay, so regarding create lists, there's a couple of ways that you can find it. It turns up in many workflows underneath acquisitions here. Create lists is underneath acquisitions, cataloging, and I believe also, it doesn't seem that it appears here, but we can add this to any of the workflows that we're currently out there. I believe it's in every workflow in our preview mode, and if it's not, we can certainly add it or modify it so it does appear there. You can also get the create lists from the Go menu. It's definitely underneath Go, Administration, and Create Lists. Even if it doesn't appear as a workflow underneath this function area, it almost always is going to be underneath Go, Administration, and then you click on the Create List option. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And here's the Create Lists interface that you would use. Before we get into actually looking at some of the new fields that are available here, I wanted to show one area that you may want to check when we go live with preview mode, and we'll be going over this once preview mode starts in a separate email. If you go to Admin Settings, there is a setting that is also available in Millennium that you can check to see matches up. Because we're merging both initials and those generic logins together now in Sierra, there's a whole bunch more information here underneath settings. If you click on Create Lists, there's an option for Create List searching that we've been using for many years. It says, do not wait for searches to complete. This is the default that allows you to move on and do other functions within the Sierra interface without having to wait for the search to complete. Those of you who may remember the old SSH client or the old Telnet client, remember we had to wait for those searches to complete before you could actually move on and do anything else in that same session. With this, you don't have to wait for searches to complete. That should be the default. If that's not the case, you can let us know and we can change that for you. These other settings I don't believe we've ever used and not really pertinent to our software. Just a couple notes about the interface. This has changed quite a bit from Millennium. If we could just take a quick look at Millennium, this is Create Lists in Millennium. This is my screen here. You'll notice we have tabs across the top. We have buttons underneath that, and then another row of buttons on near the right-hand side of the screen. In Sierra, those tabs across the top have now been moved again over here to the left side as buttons. We still have those buttons in the center, the same number of buttons here, and then we have those same row of buttons that were on the right-hand side now above here. I think it's arranged a little bit nicer in Sierra, and you have much more landscape to work with, much more room. But you can just go through and move from one section to another. These are the saved searches on the training server, saved sorts, so on and so forth. This drop-down that we have used in the past to focus on those files that are complete, in progress, empty, or limited. Those are still going to be in the same place as they were before. In our case, our innovative setup allows us for 360 review files and 300 saved queries, thereabouts. It might be a little bit larger for us. But those numbers will remain the same as they are in Millennium. Those numbers will come across, all of our files will come across. On April 2nd, when they migrate us, that's one of the things they're going to be doing, is updating all that information on our Sierra side to include all that data and all those files that we had created in Millennium as of April 1st and bring it in April 2nd. Okay, and one of the things, everything's going to work pretty much the same as it does in Millennium. The Boolean search window looks identical. There's really not a whole lot of differences here. The review file name, stored record type, all of that is the same. It's going to work the same as it does in Millennium. Your drop down here is identical, including start and stop numbers. Obviously, they'll be different for us. What I did want to highlight, however, is a number of really neat changes that are taking place in regards to the fields that you can search on. And you may not have noticed this unless it's been pointed out to you. These are differences between Sierra and Millennium. We'll start with the holds information. There are a number of new fields that have been added for holds, and they're available within a number of different fields or record types. For holds, they're available in bib, item, and patron records. So if we have our stored record type as bib, we change the record type to bibliographic to search on. If we double click here, you'll see a lot of the same fields that we have had in Millennium show up here. You can search on all of this just as you had before. However, you'll notice a new tab here at the end called holds. And here you've got a lot more information that you can use to narrow down your search. For example, the sale holds list that we do every Friday will now have the availability to eliminate those holds that are frozen. So you can, basically you won't have to view those anymore and have to regard those as stale holds, because that's always been an issue that we've never been able to isolate and get rid of those. So you'll be able to identify whether a hold is frozen. You'll be able to identify when the hold was placed, when the hold expires, its status, its current status, and the hold pickup location. So you could do a current search on everything for your hold pickup location if that's what you want to do. These are fields that we have not had before and are only available in Sierra. And again, these are available in in 3 areas: the patron record, the item record, and the bibliographic record for holds. Another new field another new set of fields, I should say, that's available for us to use is related to find information. So if I change my store record type to patron, I can see these. This find information is connected only to item and patron records. It makes sense because there's a connection between the two. So if I change this to patron, I double click here in the field area, I now have a tab for the holds. It's the same fields that we just looked at. But I now also have a whole area here for finds, and I think this will be really helpful for folks trying to figure out what active finds are on the database. It's always been kind of a problem to find finds that are still in the process of being calculated. You can get the finds paid information, but that's after the find's been assessed and in the database. But to get current find information has always been a little bit of a problem. So this will be allowing us to look at information on the database very quickly and easily via a create list query. So you could look at the item charge, the charge code, the charge location, the initials associated with a fine, terminal number, all this information that is part of that fines paid database will be available here as well. Okay, so those are the two main ones. But I've noticed a couple of other additions, particularly to the patron data, that will, I think, be a real asset to folks trying to get data out of our database. This is at this point here we're looking at the patron record information. This is a little different because it's the test server. But down below here, you'll notice there's a lot of different fields that we can use. The name fields are still problematic for us because everything is indexed in our preview mode, and I think it's going to be the same for live. In the last name field, because we don't use commas, there's no way to really separate out name information. But that's something I'll work on once we're live with Sierra to kind of populate those fields if we can. But the address information is available to us. So, for example, postal code. I did a quick search on our preview mode to see if postal code would work for zip codes, and it does work. So you can actually do a search, for example, for 53220. If you're looking for those patrons, and it will come up really quickly. There's no need to do any kind of massaging of data to get that information out. You can just do a quick search on postal code. Same goes for city and some of these other fields. But the city and postal code are kind of new fields that they've used to kind of separate data. It's kind of in that big address blob of data that you have to extract and then manipulate to actually get to the information you want. Okay, so that's patron information that you can use now in Sierra that wasn't available in Millennium. One other thing I wanted to show in terms of new fields also is underneath the order area. So if I click on order, here's my stored record type. Click on order. These are for order, just looking at order records. And if I double click in the field area, I have my order record information listed here. This is going to be very typical for what, if anyone's done searching on order records, you'll see this looks pretty much the same. However, there are additional fields here for underneath the paid area, which is not available in our current Millennium software. So you can get information on paid date, invoice date, all this different information that you can now search on where we could not do that before. Also, underneath this tab is a received area, and you can extract information on received location, copy, item, fund volume, and received date. So that information is all new. That was not available in Millennium. It's now available in Sierra. Okay, we can field questions about this after the presentation, but this is pretty much what you're going to be expecting to see when we go live with preview mode. Actually, not preview mode. When we go live on April 2nd, this is how Create List is going to use. Look, in preview mode, you can see the list of records here, but the Search Records button is grayed out. You can only just show records or show info in preview mode. You won't be able to actually work with or create a list in this mode. Since we're talking about Create Lists, I wanted to move on to this new function in Sierra called Browse Query. It's underneath. It's available if you're in a particular function such as catalog, if you're in a cataloging area, or in Circ if you're in search holds mode. It's also available under there underneath the Tools menu. So if you're looking at doing a database search of any type, it's going to allow you to see this. So it's not available in some of these other modes. So for example, we go to Circulation Desk, you'll see it doesn't appear there. It's only when you're doing a search against the database, I believe, that it's going to show up. So if we go to Tools, Browse Query, this window comes up, and it looks almost identical to Create Lists with a few exceptions. It allows you to basically bring into your search results a real granular search for fields that in particular aren't indexed. And the example I've been using is returning a result from patron email or phone numbers. If you've ever had to search for a patron phone number, you understand what I'm talking about. You have to create a list, let the list run, and go through the entire database in order to get a result on a single phone number in some cases. With this browse query, you can kind of leverage that power of Create Lists into your search results, and it's instantaneous in terms of getting results back. So if we do a quick patron search here, you'll notice it's kind of a stripped down version of Create Lists, but my telephone field is all at the bottom here. This is going to be different for us. And usually I would type in the entire phone number here. I think this will work for us. But for example, if you're looking for a patron who is getting, or a phone number that is connected to somebody who is actually not even part of our system, they're getting TNS phone calls and you're getting complaints, you need to find out who has actually got this number and take it off their record. So you could do a quick search for patron phone number has this sequence, do a quick search, and then it comes up instantaneously. Even though these are patron records, it comes up wherever. It doesn't really matter what type of record you're looking at. It will come up within this results mode. And then you can either mouse over, verify that the phone number is correct, and then make your changes, and then save off your changes to the database. So it's a real quick way to find email addresses, phone numbers, those of you who are in Circ. If you're in a technical services area, you can do all kinds of different browse queries to find information. Now, it's really good for small searches, things like email addresses, phone numbers, things that have a very finite amount of results. I think the max results that I've seen return are 5,000, but you probably don't want to do that. It does tax the system a little bit, and it takes a little bit of a time to return those results. But it will work. It's just a little bit slower if you're using a browse query. If you're using a much larger search, and you want to save the results somewhere on the server, you need to use a Create List query. That's the only way you're going to actually retain the information, because once you move away from the screen, your search results are gone for good. So it's really good for a quick search results, but you really can't do anything with the data after the screen disappears. I'll go back to this query real quick. If I bring this up, you can bring in existing searches or saved queries from the Create List area and kind of pop them in here. But those search results do disappear immediately after you've moved away from the screen. You'll see if I close this out now, my search results are actually gone already. Okay, so that's just a quick look at browse query. I've been kind of touching on that every session that I've done so far. So I just wanted to show you that. I do want to talk a little bit about statistics and what that looks like. This will be available in different modules. It's usually underneath circulation. It's not available here, of course, but you can see these. It's underneath acquisitions. Those of you who use Millennium statistics know it's available. Just go into Millennium here real quick. It's available underneath. I'm in admin mode here, but it's in different modules. Looks kind of like this. This is your list of saved queries that you've done against the database. Millennium statistics is useful for fixed field results, so how many DVDs do I own, that type of thing. Circulation statistics is a whole different ball of wax. It's going to work the same in Sierra, but this is focusing mostly on fixed field numbers. You know, how many. Let's just take a quick look at one of these result files just to show you what I'm talking about. We'll pick on Whitefish Bay here. So, for example, how many I types, you know, get a record count. Usually there's a lot more information here, but I've hidden a lot of these rows or columns. So that just gives you an idea of what you're dealing with statistics in Millennium. It's kind of the type of information you'll get. If we go back to Sierra and choose the statistics area, this is their training database, so they don't have as many saved queries out here as we might. But the organization is very similar to Create Listen, where you have the tabs at the top here in Millennium. Let's close this out. You have the saved queries and results files in Millennium at the top. Those have been moved over to buttons here on the left-hand side in Sierra. It's very similar. They've done a lot of that, moving tabs and just replacing them with buttons that are now appearing on the left-hand side. Just makes for better spacing. There are statistics settings that you can look at underneath admin settings. So if we go, there's a tab here for statistics. I think in the 10 years that I've been here in MICFLS, I've looked at these once, and they all seem to be working just fine for everyone. So if you don't feel a real need to change any of this, you can just leave them as is. I don't think it's going to affect much in terms of how things are. So we just leave the defaults as are. Almost all the logins that you're using for your MCAT, your MSER, MACQ, whatever, that we've merged with your initials are using the default, so it's not going to affect many people. And that's really it. I mean, we can look at results files here, but they look identical to what you would find in Millennium. So if we look at like one of these test reports, so I guess this is not going to work. My apologies. Just take a look at one of these. Okay, so I guess that's not going to work. All right, well, I'll just let that run a little bit and see if it'll actually respond here. I didn't have too much else to add regarding statistics, but we can answer any questions that you have regarding that. The other thing I wanted to talk about just briefly before we wrap up here is the SQL queries. We're talking about with SQL. Oh, here we go. So here's our report here. Looks, as you can see, it looks almost identical to. I think we had issues there because it was bringing in a crosstab report, so that explains a lot. Anyway, it looks almost identical to Millennium, so you're not going to have too much in the way of change here to deal with. I'll just keep this up here. Back to SQL queries. When we're talking about SQL queries, we're talking about using a third-party piece of software to gain access to the tables within the database. The tables that we're talking about basically store all the information in our system. So your patron record information is in a table, linked to many different tables, and bibliographic information and others. Everything that's part of our system, all the data is stored in these tables. And you can use, within Sierra, one of the real selling points with this particular ILS system was the fact that you could use a piece of software to dig really deep into your database and pull out that information that before it was not available within Millennium. So you can run all kinds of reports that we just did not have access to before. The way that this is going to work, I know that there's some of you out there who want to get access to that data, and the way I'm envisioning this working is that we will allow people access to get into this these SQL tables if they do some kind of coursework with myself. So we would hold some kind of continuing ed course on SQL and how it works with Sierra, and then after that course is finished, then you would have access. We can grant you access to those SQL tables with your initials. That's how it's going to work. It's all managed by your initials. And the timetable for that, I'm thinking, is going to be somewhere around mid-year, probably June or July, before I can get to this. There are a lot of queries that have already been established by other Sierra users at other systems. So we'll take whatever they have and then kind of build on that for the future. So you can run your own circulation reports, things like that, that we can build here at MCFLS. And that will probably take us a while to build everything, but the sky's the limit in terms of the number of queries that we can do. But we have to kind of be careful because there is an impact with some queries can have a real bad impact on a system because it takes a lot of processing power to generate those if they're really, really huge. So we just have to be careful about that and kind of manage that smartly. The last thing I'll just finish up here before we get to questions is known issues. As far as I know, there's no major known issues with regard to create lists and queries in Innovative. However, I have heard of 2 issues through the grapevine, through folks I've talked with either at Marquette University or other users. And one is that copying review files seems to have taken a little bit longer than normal in Sierra. So if you're copying, for example, if we go back to create lists here, just to show you what I'm talking about. You take an empty review file and you click on the copy button. Copying anything from this list here seems to take a little bit longer than normal. I'm not going to do anything right here. Just so you're mindful of that, and hopefully this will be fixed, so I'm going to talk with them about this. Also, creating a sublist off an existing review file may also take longer than usual. This is coming from a couple users, so kind of take it with a grain of salt. But just so you know, everything may not be perfect day one, but we'll definitely work on them to correct those things because we use sublists quite a bit in this system. Okay, we have a few minutes here for questions. What I'd like for you to do is if you could send your questions via the chat queue at the bottom of your GoToMeeting module here, and let me know if you have any questions that I can address now. And just so you know, we will have Q&A sessions later in March on the 26th and 27th that you can also sign up for, and we can address anything that doesn't come up now. Any questions? Last call? Okay, Shorewood staff has got all the information they need, apparently. Well, seeing as there are no questions, of course you can always feel free to just send me an email or any kind of questions you have later on if something appears to you. It's kind of hard, I know, at this point because you guys haven't been able to actually work with us yet. Before we can get into preview mode, it's kind of difficult to really talk about it too much intelligently. But once you get a chance to look at this, if you do have questions, feel free to just raise them with me, and I'd be certainly happy to take care of them. So thanks a lot, everybody. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully we will have some very good news this afternoon, hopefully. Thanks, and have a good day.